Good morning, Amsterdam. Cool. I think we can do slightly better. This is the room where all of the leads or future leads are. So let's try again. Good morning, Amsterdam. Ooh. Yeah, thanks a lot for the great greeting. So I'm really excited to see so many of you here interested in leadership-related topics. My name is Persa, and after more than 10 years of being a software engineer, roughly 3 years ago, I decided to get into a leadership position. Right now, I'm working as an engineering lead for Zalando in Berlin. And, well, I'd like to thank my company for the opportunity to, well, first of all, get into leadership, as well as for facilitating speaking at this conference. Today, I'd like to share some of the things I learned while I was getting started as a lead, and I hope that my experiences will smoothen your leading path and will bring your leadership skills to the next level. My goal for today is not to cover everything a lead should know, but rather focus on the things which seemed less obvious to me back when I was getting started. As leaders, it's our responsibility to inspire people, to give them purpose, to show them how their effort contributes to a bigger cause, something bigger than themselves, to explain the why behind the how and what. So let's start with why here as well. Why have I decided to become a lead? Simple. I got inspired by the people around me, by my wife, who used to be a software engineer and became a lead earlier than I did. By discussing with her, I got in contact with the interesting people problems leads have to solve. I realized that dealing with people problems is much more challenging than dealing with computers. There is much more unknown, more unpredictability, but still really high impact. One of my friends and former colleagues inspired me as well. He's one of the best individual contributors any company could hire. He also became a lead earlier than I did. When I asked for advice on whether or not I should follow his steps, he told me, "If I were you, I wouldn't do it." The leading role we have in our company doesn't really fit me. I'm a hands-on person, and this role involves less coding. Which leads us to the first learning I'd like to share with you. Each company interprets the leading role in a slightly different way. In some companies, you're a technical lead. In others, a people manager. In most companies, it's something in between. And there are the rest of the companies which don't have a well-defined role, and tell you frankly, part of your job is to discover what your role is about. It's really important to read the job description and make sure it fits your expectations. It's important to answer questions like, would you continue to write code? Will you lead the architecture discussions in your team? Would you like to define your own role and have less uncertainty? Or would you rather go crazy and go with a role which is not well defined? Also important, getting into leadership is one option for growing, but it shouldn't be the only one. In the past, in order to get a higher salary, you needed to get into leadership. Nowadays, lots of companies like Zalando have 2 career tracks. One which allows engineers to grow their impact within the organization as individual contributors, and the other one to get into official leadership. Both of these tracks rewarded equally. No matter the career track, going into your role is all about having a higher impact, responsibility, and influence within your organization. And this requires leadership skills. That's why I think most of the things I'm sharing today are useful for both tracks. As you might expect, getting into leadership is not something trivial. In order to successfully go through the transition, I asked for the support of the people around me, my leads, for example. I have to thank many people here, especially the head of my department, who created a step-by-step process on how to get from an engineering position to a lead. Back then, there was no such official process within the company, and his goal was to set me and another person up for success. I find this a good example of leadership. Whenever something important is missing, take the initiative and make it happen. Which leads us to the learning. Even though getting into leadership is challenging, you can definitely do it. But you should not do this alone. You need support. It's your responsibility to make sure you are set up for success and ask for help. In case you're already a lead, offer your support to the developers who want to take the leading path. It's part of your role to identify and grow the talent in your company. Part of my plan of becoming a lead was going through a 3-month transition period of intense mentoring. One of the leads in my company took the responsibility to mentor me, and I'd like to thank him for this. His help was priceless. During the first week as a lead, 2 things took me by surprise. First was how much time as a lead I have to spend in meetings. Agile meetings, alignment meetings, goal setting meetings, OKR meetings, strategy meetings, one-on-ones. Don't get me wrong, meetings are really important as they are a way to communicate with a really high throughput. But for an introvert like me, in the first month, it was really hard to keep the pace. I was getting home, energy drained, not wanting to speak with anybody for the whole evening. Good news is that apparently, with time, I got used to having many meetings a day. I also got better at choosing the meetings I participate to, as well as the meetings I organize. I'd like to share the steps I follow in order to tame my calendar. Step number 1, say no to meetings. I'm taking a look at my calendar and notice that during the current week, I'm overwhelmed by appointments. For each of these, I ask myself, would the outcome of this meeting change if I'm not there? Am I able to delegate going to this meeting to another member of the team? Learning to say no to meetings will free some time to keep me floating, but this is not enough. As a lead, it's really important to do individual work, do planning, think about the strategy, think about feedback, reflect on what went wrong in order to improve things, and prepare for all of the meetings I participate to. When I was getting started as a lead, I was looking at my calendar 2 weeks from now and saying to myself, I would do all of these important things in 2 weeks. My calendar looks much cleaner. When checking again 1 week in advance, I was noticing that I was getting more invites. If I was not doing anything, on Monday morning, probably my calendar would look like this, and on Monday afternoon, like this. In order to avoid this, step number 2 of taming my calendar is to book slots in advance for at least individual work, reading email, and really urgent meetings. If somebody has an urgency, I point them to the already reserved slot in order not to mess up my whole schedule. And last but not least, as email proves to be a real time waster and is constantly interrupting my flow, I read email only twice a day, once in the morning and once in the evening. I started doing this last month and it totally changed the dynamics of my day. For the good, less distraction, more time to focus. The second thing which took me by surprise during the first week of leadership was the fact that I soon realized that I was not going through a regular promotion process, like I did before from junior engineer to middle and then senior. But I was rather going through a career switch. The reason I'm saying this is because the skill set required to be an effective lead is not a natural evolution of the skill set required to be a successful developer. I realized that I have to learn a whole lot more than I was expecting, even to somehow change my identity. Well-established things, which were working really well when I was an engineer, started not to work anymore after getting into leadership. It was actually really important to forget some of the basic things I knew from software development, like don't repeat yourself principle. When dealing with people, repeating is key to make sure everybody is aligned. So just to set the right expectation, the learning here is that taking the leadership path from engineering is a career switch. It's not a regular promotion. Don't underestimate it. This career switch literally changed my life. And change is never easy. Here's one of the most important things I learned while doing this. And if my talk would only have a couple of slides, I would keep these ones. In order to successfully go through big changes, you need to be a Zen master. What does this mean? For me, it means three things. Allow yourself to fail. Acknowledge that as you're doing this for the first time, chances of having some failures are quite high. In case this happens, don't be too harsh to yourself. But also don't forget to reflect on the things which went wrong and learn from it. Use failure as an opportunity for learning and have a plan on how to recover fast. It's the same story as dealing with distributed systems. Things will eventually fail, so we need failover mechanisms. Second, don't underestimate the stress you gain when going through big changes. Instead, manage the stress. Make sure you disconnect once in a while by taking a long vacation. Plan ahead. Control your calendar by blocking slots in advance. We already talked about this, to make sure you don't feel overwhelmed. When things are planned in advance, you gain more confidence, so it's less likely to get stressed. Use stress as an ally. Stress is one way our body and brain reacts when we're dealing with new things or extreme situations. It helps us focus on what's important. Acknowledge that and allow your body and brain to keep you focused. For example, I'm focusing on speaking right now. I can't even imagine doing anything else, for example, checking my phone. Third, empathize with the people around you. Try to understand the point of view of your customers, upper management, and directs as well. Ask questions and try not to rely on assumptions. We are all in the same team and we want to be successful. But different people think differently. Not acknowledging this might bring lots of frustration. Believe it or not, leading takes lots of energy. So every one of you must start taking care of yourselves first. It's the same recommendation like in an airplane. Put your own oxygen mask first. If you faint, both you and the others who already fainted around you are in big trouble. As a lead, I need to be a role model for my team, to motivate the team. And this cannot happen if I'm low in energy or, even worse, about to get burnt out. My goal, and your goal as new leads, is to become effective in your roles as soon as possible. So how do you learn new skills related to leadership in a really short amount of time? Here are some of the sources I had. I learned a lot by shadowing my mentor in the first month, having discussions about his thinking process and about how he makes decisions. Having his support helped me have a smooth transition and kept me from feeling lost. I cannot imagine going through this transition without a mentor. Another source of learning and inspiration was applying what I read in books. Notice that I didn't say only reading books. I don't think this is enough. The most efficient thing which worked for me was reading a book, deciding what from that book fits my leadership style, reflect on how can I apply it to my specific case, and just then putting it to practice. Another source of learning and inspiration came from my former managers. I tried to remember the good and not so good behaviors they had. How did they manage to motivate me in the past? How did they provide constructive feedback and help me grow? What did they do wrong? What did I swear I would never do if I ever become a lead? Here is my slide with code. This is a tech conference, so I'm pretty sure you're already missing code. Spoiler alert, you might miss it even more after you become a lead, at least in the beginning. Developers should spend most of their time coding, but what about leads? This is a really hard question to answer, as it depends a lot on the setup. How big is the team? What is the organization expecting from the lead, etc.? I'll still try to answer it, although it might be controversial. Engineering is not about code. Engineering is about solving problems. Code brings cost, development cost, maintenance cost, operations cost. The bigger a code base gets, the more expensive it is to maintain and run. The code is a necessary evil which allows engineers to solve problems for their customers. Everything is about the customers and their problems. If we are able to solve all of these problems without writing code, is amazing. Every member of an organization should optimize for impact, should ask themselves, what's the most important thing I could do right now, according to my role, in order to have the highest impact? So what are the most important things leads could do? Here is a list, not necessarily sorted by priority. Making sure the team has enough talented engineers and the candidates have a great experience. Making sure the members of the team are rewarded for the great job they are doing. Making sure the team is not blocked. Making sure knowledge is shared within the team. Making sure the team has a good communication with their stakeholders. Making sure the team has a clear, motivating purpose. There might be other points here, then there might be coding and others. My learning here is that I should prioritize different activities by impact and start with the most important ones. Coding might be one of these activities, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. One of the things I never liked at some of my previous jobs was not having the feeling to be working in a safe and open environment. In those workplaces, instead of everybody focusing on delivery and learning from each other, everybody was more or less covering their backs. Without mutual trust between me and the team, we can't have such an open environment where everybody is able to unleash their creativity and innovate. How do you earn the trust of the team? I can tell you, this is not easy. Trusting somebody means taking the risk to open yourself to be vulnerable towards a person you trust. And I can tell you, it's not natural for anybody to instantly open up and start being vulnerable in front of their manager. Here are some of the things I'm doing. I'm trying to earn the respect of the team by leveraging the fact that before being a lead, I was an engineer. I'm aiming to do pair programming with the members of the team and also, if possible, do code reviews. Setting up regular one-on-ones is also really helpful. Getting to know each other is important. I use this occasion to provide feedback and ask for feedback as well. Another thing which helps is trying to be as transparent as possible with regards of the decision-making process, especially related to performance evaluation. Speaking about performance evaluation, let's shortly introduce the principle of no surprises. The principle of no surprises says that all of your directs deserve to know at each moment where you think they are in terms of career development and performance, so that at the end of any evaluation cycle, they are not surprised with the results of their performance review. Predictability and transparency are the key in establishing trust. For more details on the principle of no surprises, read the article on this topic I published on Medium. Trusting me was one thing, but also important for the team is trusting each other and become more confident in solving problems. Usually, the best solutions to problems come from the team. As a lead, I was initially tempted to solve problems on behalf of the team. Now I try not to do this anymore. Instead, I try to help the team take ownership for their problems, as these are opportunities for learning. As I said, usually the team has the best solutions for the problems they have. My job is to help them discover these solutions. Related to trust and fairness are biases. There are many ways to describe what they are, but simply said, they are bugs in our brain's operating system. On the slide, we see a visual bias. It looks like the image on the screen moves when in fact it doesn't. The brain is tricked by the way the colors were arranged in this image. Let's quickly switch from that one, as it's not my plan to hypnotize you. Here is another example of a visual bias. Believe it or not, the square marked with A has the same shade of gray as the square marked with B. Yes, you heard me right, square A and square B, they have the exact same color. You can measure it after the talk. Because the ways the colors were arranged in the image, our brain is not able to realize that. Visual biases are not the most important ones for leads, but they demonstrate that we are all biased, as all of our brains were programmed in a similar way. As leaders, it's our responsibility to build diverse teams, which are able to create user-friendly, innovative products. Unconscious biases are preventing us from achieving this by influencing the way we make decisions. Instead of taking decisions based on the data our brain gathered about a specific person or thing, we take decisions based on stereotypes our brains unconsciously create. Today, I'll introduce two biases. Confirmation bias is the tendency to search and favor information which confirms our already existing beliefs. Let's take an example. Let's assume that you're interviewing a candidate. You notice that that person was at the same university as you were. You know for a fact that only smart people finish at that university. And during the interview, you're unconsciously looking for evidence to prove that. For example, by asking easier questions or leading the candidate towards an answer. This behavior brings disadvantage to all of the other candidates. Recency bias is the phenomenon of a person most easily remembering something that has happened recently compared to remembering something that may have occurred a while back. If we are not aware of this bias, there is a risk that during providing feedback for a yearly performance evaluation to a colleague or direct report, we might give more weight to the behaviors which happened more recently. The last few months might have been better or worse compared to the rest of the year, but would define the whole review, which, again, is not fair. In order to overcome this bias, companies could gather feedback many times a year, ideally continuously. The most important thing an individual can do in order to overcome biases is to learn about them. Be aware they exist. Be aware that everybody is biased. Learn how they manifest in order to compensate for them. And create processes which take into account the existence of biases. One of the biggest differences compared to when I was an engineer is the length of the feedback loop. We live in the era of instant gratification. We post something on our favorite social network and we start checking our phones for likes in the next minutes. In software development, we have the test-driven development cycle. We write a test, we make sure it fails, we write the minimal amount of code to make it pass, refactor, and repeat. Seeing the test green gives that pill of satisfaction, and this happens many times a day. When you're a lead, you know something goes well when a project gets delivered, a milestone is reached, or somebody from your team gets promoted. This can take months. You also don't get fast feedback when you're doing something wrong. You find, for example, that some of the best developers are leaving the team, but that's already too late to fix something. The best possible thing in order to have the feeling that things are on track is to try to reduce this feedback loop as much as possible. For example, by asking for feedback from the members of the team with every occasion. At work, we take many tiny or bigger decisions many times a day. Leadership roles give the opportunity to take decisions with impact for many people, potentially a whole team. While taking good decisions is not something trivial or easy to learn, the learning I'd like to share here is about the cost of not taking decisions. Not taking or postponing a decision is a decision on its own. We are accountable for both the decisions we take as well as for the decisions we decide not to take. Let me give you an example. One common decision type I have to take really often, which caused me some headache at the beginning, was whether or not I should give constructive feedback to one of the members of the team. And if I decide I should, when is the right time to do it? This is a really important but hard to take decision, because if I fail to deliver the feedback, the person cannot improve. On the other side, if I choose to deliver constructive feedback too often, the members of the team might have the feeling that I'm trying to micromanage them. Finding the balance is crucial. As a rule of thumb, I now give feedback as close as possible to the moment in time when the action which generated my need to provide this feedback happened. I try to balance the constructive feedback with positive feedback, and I never forget to ask for feedback for myself, to make sure I encourage a feedback culture. What's a feedback culture and why is it important? For me, a feedback culture means that we grow together as a team. Each member of the team thinks about what the other members of the team can improve and share that with them. On the other side, we celebrate successes, both big and small, and we don't forget to give credit for every achievement a team member has. A prerequisite for creating such a feedback culture is trusting each other. Also making sure the development feedback is decoupled from the performance evaluation and has no financial implications. In the first weeks after a developer joins the company, there is an onboarding period. The new engineer starts to learn about the products in the company, about the technologies used, about the company structure, about the company values. Starts getting familiar with the topic assigned to their team and with the members of the team as well. While the technical onboarding might take from 1 to few months, getting used to the company culture could take, from my point of view, more. Even when you're careful to hire people who might seem to be a good cultural fit for the company. My approach to set the newbies up for success is to have one-on-ones with a higher frequency compared to the other members of the team. In which each one-on-one, on top of provided feedback, I open the discussion about different topics which are important with regards of the company culture, like the meaning of team autonomy, like speaking up when there is a problem, like the expectation that they should actively seek feedback and to provide feedback to the other members of the team as well. Part of my job is to make sure newbies get a smooth onboarding, and by the end of the onboarding period, they are set up for success. Here is a summary. As we already know, the don't repeat yourself principle is overrated, so I'll repeat everything I just said. Getting started, making sure you know exactly what your role is about. Otherwise, we might have surprises and be unhappy. It's hard to do the transition alone. Ask for support. Be a Zen master. Don't forget to learn about biases. Talking about the transition, it's a career switch. It's expected to be more painful compared to your last promotion. The meetings, you'll get used to the meetings. Also, don't forget to manage your calendar. The feedback loop will be longer, but the satisfaction higher. You still need to learn fast. The best way is from a mentor. Don't underestimate the importance of onboarding. On the delivery side, trust instead of control. Try not to surprise your directs. Don't be afraid to take decisions. Support your team and create a feedback culture. We started with why, and I'd like to end with why as well. I'd like to provide a topic of reflection. Why would a company hire you as a lead instead of hiring another software engineer in their team? What's your plan? Answer this and unleash your leadership superpowers. We are getting to the end of the presentation and to the Q&A session. If you like my talk, don't forget to follow me on Twitter. So thanks a lot for listening.